You know how I know they're up to no good? Because they just made it so that we can't even ask to see if they're up to no good. What you hiding, boys? Let's talk about what this means, because it conveniently sounds a little bit boring. It's not. Despite preaching transparency all up and down the Twitter seaboard, their little club, I believe the name is Doggy, has just been designated as being completely insulated from public records requests or judicial intervention until at least 2034. They're using a pretty convenient loophole here, which I do realize is their strong suit. If you don't know what FOIA requests are, they may be Americans' best friend, really. FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. And this is kind of based on the idea that the government ultimately works for us, the American people. Outside of classified or otherwise sensitive information, the idea is that we should be able to see what our employees are up to. And you don't have to be anyone special to do this. You can submit a FOIA request from a specific branch or department about a specific subject. It can't be too broad, but you can do that. And technically by law, they have to respond to your FOIA request within, I believe it's like 6 months. There is obviously a huge backlog. We can obviously talk about all the flaws with the system, happy to, but in theory, this is a tool for us, not just journalists, but us, the American people. Personally, I love FOIA, and not just because it's an important tool, but because it's one of my hobbies to trawl through FOIA and declassified documents. I found some fun stories in there, remind me to tell you later. So because Doggy was, quote, reorganized under the Executive Office of the President, it's now subject to the Presidential Records Act, according to them. That act basically shields all documents, communications, records, etc. from the president, his advisors, and staff until 5 years after that president leaves office. Gaia willing. In other words, it basically shields presidential records from FOIA requests. Here's another fun loophole that they've just kicked wide open. They're still required to preserve the vast majority of written documents and materials created while performing their job, but they are allowed to dispose of certain records after getting written approval from the archivist at the National Archives, whom you may remember was just fired. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that the archivist was in fact just doing her job last time certain documents went missing. Watchdog groups will challenge this in courts, but our country runs way too much on the honor system. During his first term, the courts allowed him to basically ignore records requests by nonprofits that were trying to stop his advisors from using auto-deleting messaging apps, because that technically goes against the part of the law that says they still have to preserve these records. This article posits that it'll be argued that because they're not just advising, they're acting, they are subject to FOIA, but that could be hard to prove without first accessing the documents. All I know is if you really got nothing to hide, stop trying to hide it. After all, if you're going to argue that these guys don't need security clearances to do what they're doing, well, that means that we don't need security clearances to know what that is.